This is a Roll for Crit review, and today our subject of discussion is Yamatai from Days of Wonder, a game co-designed by Bruno Cathala, who's done a lot of great work on Abyss and King Domino and many others that you've probably played. And the idea here is that we're trying to impress Queen Himiko, isn't that right?
Mm-hmm, that is.
And we're trying to build the capital of Yamatai.
Yes.
Yes, so it's a pretty big deal, and to do that, you can see you're trying to put boats down, you're trying to build buildings, you're trying to do it better than everybody else.
Yes, you'll be working on making these trade routes for the boats. You'll be using green for bamboo, brown for wood, red for clay, black for stone, and yellow for gold. You'll be playing along the board, which will help you spread your influence across the board. In addition, you'll be placing your buildings onto different spaces. But what the big thing about this game is, it has a lot about give and take. For you see, just because I placed this green boat, everyone has access to it now. So it's not mine. So what that means, if I use the green boat to reach access to this island, you may be able to build off that route to get new access to the island.
Yes, that is correct. There's a lot of bouncing off of each other's plays, a lot of things to consider on other people's turns, what they're going to do, etc. You can see every turn you kind of have a similar thing that you're going to do in the same order every time that's laid out for you on this sheet.
Yeah, really nice. Everyone is the same. It's colors different. It's not like any asymmetrical, so pretty much, this is just for art style and letting you know that's the orange player.
Right, so you're going to pick one of these tiles, which gives you a boat and maybe a special ability, and it determines your turn order for the next round. So you may want to pick a higher number to give you better rewards, but a lower number to go earlier in the round would maybe help you in different ways.
Yes, once again, the give and take. You either can take the stronger power, but next round you're going to be maybe last to pick.
Again, everything is interconnected, and the boats, the way that you place them, you have to match off of their colors, at least initially. So you're concerned about which colors of boats for that reason. And as you said, for these buildings you're building, you need to have a certain pattern of colors around an island. The order doesn't matter, you just need to have, for instance, 2 greens and a red.
They all also don't even need to be placed. For example, if there was a building here that needed a red and 2 red and a black, if I just put a green here, it means I can affect that island, whether it's building or taking these tiles. Because the game actually starts, we already have it pretty much, almost the game looks like it's about to end, but the game starts with a tile on almost every single one of these islands. These are used to, you can't just build on them, you have to clear them, but if you either spend 2 of the same color or 3 of any color, you could hire a specialist. These give you amazing abilities, such as this one will let you pick more tiles when you pick up tiles. Or you can have ones that give you an extra buy phase or even sell ships for a much higher cost, which can make these crazy combos.
Yeah, they really affect your strategy throughout the game. And in that sense, even though it's not asymmetric to start, it kind of can become asymmetric. These are basically like player powers that you're buying. On your turn, you can only do one of the 2 things, either build something or take these tokens off of the island. So you really have to choose what's more important. What are you worried about someone else doing before you? And eventually, the game will end based on different resources running out. There's a variety of ways that you can get points from things. There's really multiple paths that you have to take, although you can kind of specialize, especially depending on which specialists you have picked up throughout the game. Yeah, so basic flow of the game, you take a tile, you put boats down, you either build or get specialists. Pretty straightforward. There's the thing that makes it, I think, interesting from turn to turn is this sort of puzzle aspect, to me, is the core of it, of almost like a bejeweled sort of way of thinking, of wanting to match these colors up correctly and get them into the positions that you want based on the colors to build primarily is what you want those for.
Now, for me, I think why this game shines so well is, as we've said multiple times, because I wanted to emphasize it, is the give and take. You can snowball, but one of the things is it's hard because in essence, to gain power, you're giving other people the option to collect power, which become very deadly. Because there were times when I thought I did this amazing move, I'm like, I made so many points this turn, you can't do anything. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, you just opened that up for me? And then I'm like, oh.
Yeah, everything that you do, it almost always feels like you missed out on another thing you could have done instead, which sounds kind of defeating, but it doesn't feel as bad as it sounds. It's not like something like Agricola, for instance, where I feel like it's very punishing, where you're always like, oh, if only I had another turn to do something. But you are always conscious of what other people are doing. It did actually remind me a lot, I mentioned briefly the game Abyss that he also worked on, especially the system of taking tiles down there, which I think Abyss had a similar system of turn order. So in that sense reminded me of that. Also, just the art style. It's so colorful and bright to look at. It makes me think of like M&Ms or something. I feel like I'm playing with little candies.
Yes, which is great if you can see the color. We have noticed online with a lot of people, because, I mean, you even said you didn't know what the boats stand for. You're just like, oh, that's just a black boat. If you can't see color, there's no way you're going to tell like green from yellow. And that's, I think, one of the big troubles with this game. Like the tokens have different symbols, which makes sense. It's just surprising that these don't. So unless you have a marker to write it down, it's sort of...
It is surprising. It's not something I had thought of because I'm not colorblind, so I have that privilege. But yeah, in hindsight, it's like, that is weird, because usually, and Days of Wonder is pretty good, usually they take those kinds of things into account, which is odd. But yeah, like you're saying, I didn't realize, wait, this stands for something? I had no idea, which is... kind of speaks to, and I don't really think it's a bad thing, but the theme is really not that much there in this game. It's really purely the aesthetic. I think it almost does have the feel of a more on the abstract side title. But these specialists, right, I guess, represent something if you feel like giving them meaning beyond just.
I mean, they do look cool, and definitely, I think some of the pictures like this person who looks like a master of like sea monsters and stuff lets you build on the outside, so it has a little bit of a theme there.
This is a game where you could fall into an analysis paralysis trap, where you sometimes are thinking things through so much, trying to plan out the next turns, and especially I think towards the end of the game, because you're saying how the game could end. Sometimes there'll only be like there's 2 red boats left, and on your turn, that's when you really have to start to think. It's possible for me to end the game right now. Should I, or not? And then if you don't, the next person might have the same decision, and it could really prolong.
And I've had plenty of times when I've been like, okay, I'll do this because this is what you're gonna do, and you don't do that. So like, you will be thrown off, which in turn, this is definitely, I'm falling into this camp. And sometimes if someone does that kind of thing, then when it comes back to your turn, you're like spending 2 hours rethinking everything. And if you're in a 2-player game, instead of just having 2 chips, you actually have 2 more meeples. So you get to take 2 turns in essence, which really adds some new strategy, because as we were playing, sometimes we're like, if I take this, in essence, I'll be able to have 4 turns in a row because I'll get the last 2 turns and the first 2 turns in the next round.
It's a big deal. The 2-player game versus 3 or 4 is definitely very different, but in some ways almost more fun. It seemed like there was more action going on the board and less downtime, so to speak. I definitely would recommend it as a 2-player game. I think it works great.
Definitely, because they each have different reasons of fun. The reason the 2-player was fun, because since it's such a back and forth, I feel it's much harder to get cut off, since you have 2 turns as well. So for both of us, we were just like, oh, I can still do this, and I can do this crazy thing.
Yeah.
When in the 3 and 4, like every time you're like, okay, if I put this in the wrong way, I'm giving you such a huge advantage. Like, so you're so much more.
Because you got to wait a lot longer before your turn comes up, for sure. Yeah, that's a thing. So yeah, overall, I love these specialists. I think these are where the games shine, as well as placing the boats and making those patterns is just a satisfying kind of puzzle to solve. But I really thought that the different strategies that the game forces you to think about were a lot of fun. I liked this. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, these are definitely... They were a lot of fun, because this was where it makes you different from you and me, because we have different rules.
This is what changed it from just like a basic Euro game to the weird stuff that can change things.
But having though only 5 tiles available, and when everyone picks their tiles, new ones show up, and just having to think that sort of this round, the 10 may be coming up if I really need that gold chip. So maybe I want to go early for the next round so I can pick that 10 later. And that's a whole fun game. I feel like that whole back and forth of just deciding on how is the earlier turn, which in some cases we actually argued is pretty weak, like the 1, is it worth giving up or having more ships?
Yeah, there's definitely these kind of 3 different zones that you're trying to think of, almost like 3 mini games that make up the larger whole. Yamatai. Here's our crits and misses. Crits. Depending on which tiles pop up and when, every game could be a very different experience, and there are multiple strategies that you may end up having to use that could really change the way you view the game. There's a great give and take gameplay loop present here where everything that you do has an impact on other players, and you're constantly thinking about how you're helping others versus how you're hurting others and what the best choice is in every situation.
Plenty of your moves aren't just simply, I'm going to just take this spot. They could actually open up more areas for your opponents, which really makes it hard for one player to just be out of the game permanently, and therefore allows you to always have to keep track of what's happening in the game.
Although all players start the game out on the same level, as the game goes on, you'll be gaining different specialists giving you different unique and varied powers, allowing you to pull off some neat combos and kind of some light engine building that's really satisfying to pull off.
And for misses, in 4-player games, it can be a little frustrating to have to wait for everyone's turn, in particular when your strategy gets knocked out the window by turn 2.
Yeah, it seems like more frequently with the higher player counts, you can end up just not having enough time to really put together something good for a turn, and it does feel pretty bad to feel like you've wasted part of the round when everybody else is having fun.
While we're not colorblind, we can see this to be an extremely difficult game for people who are, and would require us to actually mark the meeples somehow in order to make sure you understand what is a green ship, what is a yellow ship, and whose buildings belong to who.
Board game publishers put symbols on your tokens. It's easy.
Yamatai is a game all about finding balance on your turn, whether it's getting too much power, therefore giving it to your opponent, or not doing enough for yourself, which, while not giving enough to your opponent, may not give you a good enough head start.
Yeah, there's a lot of giving and a lot of getting going around, and you really want to get in on the getting and the giving. This is just a solid title. If you like these kinds of Euro games, but with somewhat of a randomness to it, so it's not totally mapped out, you can't really solve the game, I don't think. This is definitely one that you should try out. Bruno Cathala's a great designer. Days of Wonder puts out great games. It's a winner, I think, on pretty much every level.
And like we said, while this game does go up to 4, we found that a 2-player actually is a different game style, and it was quite enjoyable, just as much as the 3 to 4 were.
Yeah, so something to keep in mind if you got a partner to play with. Let us know if you do, or if you don't, or if you didn't like the game or you did in the comments section below. We really like to hear those things from you. But until that time comes that we see you again, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this was a Roll for Crit review.
Hey, if you like what you saw, don't forget to subscribe and like this video for more excellent board game content.
Heck yeah!